lighting up the darkest night. I see your face in each flower and in every drop of dew. Oh, everywhere I look, there are you. I see you in the mountains with such silent majesty. I see you in the treetops and in birds that fly so free. I see you in the eyes of friends when they look back at me. Oh, everywhere I look, there you. Even when dark clouds do sometimes hide the sun, and your face seems hidden, and I feel so all alone, I still know that I'm your child, surrounded by your grace. Please keep me ever close to you and show your precious face. I see you in each step I take, in every place I may be, in every face before my eyes, in waves upon the sea, in each and every pleasure, and even in my pain. Oh, everywhere I look, there you. I see you in my hopes and fears, and in my every song. I see you in my smiles and tears. To you I do belong. You're the soul within me and the love within my heart. Oh, everywhere I look, there are you. Yes, you're the soul within me and the love within my heart. Oh, everywhere I look, there are you. Yes, everywhere I look, there are you. There are you. There are you. Om asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityorma amritam gamaya. Om shanti shanti shanti. Om, lead us from the transient to the eternal. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. Om, peace, peace, peace. Good morning, everyone. Nice to see all of you. I'm going to be talking today about a very hot topic, which I'm sure is kind of on the tips of everybody's tongues these days, AI. And I want to look at it from a spiritual standpoint, and specifically the spiritual tradition of Vedanta. Because I think there's a lot to say, and I think it's easy to get carried away with histrionics and doomsday scenarios. I will talk about some of those doomsday scenarios. But on the other hand, as Vedantins, I think there's a lot for us to be hopeful about. And ultimately, I want to defend a kind of positive and optimistic position on AI. So I want you to hear me out, and I'd love to hear you as well in the Q&A afterward. I'm sure you'll have lots of questions. Well, I gave a version of this talk on AI in Trabuco Canyon, I think in January. And it hasn't even been 6 months. But I found the need to update my talk in many ways in light of the most recent developments. AI is advancing with a kind of breathtaking rapidity, which I think none of us are really prepared for, not even the creators and developers of AI. And it's freaking them out to a certain extent too. And at the same time, capitalism and other motives are kind of driving them to run headlong into this kind of unknown frontier. We don't know where exactly we're headed, and it is scary. It's also exciting. It's kind of exciting and scary at the same time, like a roller coaster ride. So in January, I was talking about how AI has become creepy, and now I can only say it's become much creepier 5 months later. And with each passing day, it gets creepier and creepier. And I think creepy is the right word. It's kind of uncanny. The way that people are interacting now with AI, it's like it really feels like there is a human being on the other end. For better or worse. I mean, I think for better and worse in a way. It seems to be exhibiting a lot of the good qualities of human beings, and also more disturbingly and creepily, it also seems to be exhibiting a lot of human vices, like very ordinary human vices, like selfishness, pettiness, cruelty, thirst for power. So I think this should worry us. I think the greatest danger is complacency. I think we need to go into this with our eyes open and kind of avoid knee-jerk emotionalism on both sides. I think it's really important to try to preserve nuance and critical thinking in this age that encourages us to take shortcuts in thinking and to just run to either the left extreme or the right extreme or this or that. It's all about extremes and polarities these days, and I think it's really dangerous to do that, especially in the context of AI. Well, just to give you, I'll talk about some examples of the growing creepiness of AI later in more detail, but just to mention a couple things. First of all, how many of you have heard of, there's a thing called hereafter AI? How many? This is quite interesting. Hereafter AI. One of your loved ones dies. So what does this app do? It'll create an AI version of your deceased loved one with whom you can continue to interact with. And it really does get super creepy. And the thing is, I'm not outright condemning it, because the thing is, it's for people who are suffering from devastating loss and tragedy and mourning the loss of somebody who was dear to their hearts for their entire life. They're saying how much consolation they're getting from this AI replica. And so it's easy to condemn, but I think it's better to sympathize on the one hand, and then also recognize the dangers of that, and that it is a little creepy and uncanny. There's a little short film. I want to plug a short film by a brilliant student of mine named Ellis Fowler on this topic. It's called #Anniversary, and it's free on YouTube. It's just like a 11 or 12-minute short film about this kind of sci-fi thing that's literally happening right now. AI recreations of dead relatives and loved ones. So I recommend you check it out. #Anniversary. More creepiness, especially in the spiritual realm. In Lucerne, Switzerland, they've come up with an AI Jesus. And so instead of going to a human priest or praying to Jesus, you're praying to an AI Jesus who talks back to you. And there's a kind of intuitive appeal to it, which is that when we pray to God, most of us are not getting direct responses. Some of us, I guess, are lucky enough to get the direct responses. But many of us, most of us, I would say, if you're sincere in prayer and you're not overly emotional, we're not really getting direct responses. We might get indirect responses, and I think that's what sustains us. We get responses in other ways. When we really sincerely pray to the divine does answer our prayers, but in ways that we may not be expecting, and it's not in the way that, if I say something to you, you directly respond to me verbally. That's not the way it works. But what are the benefits of an AI Jesus? Well, it's that you get that direct response immediately. But then ultimately what ends up happening is that you're short-circuiting further spiritual progress, right? Because spirituality is not easy. That's why the Upanishads describe spiritual life as walking on a razor's edge. And there aren't really ultimately shortcuts in spiritual life. And I think that AI, one of the things I'll be talking about is how AI is kind of promising yet another shortcut in spiritual life. There are others. Drugs is another example. But we should be wary. So, some of the questions I want to tackle, and not necessarily in this order. What are some of the benefits of AI? And this I hope I don't have to talk about in too much detail because I think most of us sitting here know what the benefits are. What are its downsides? What are its risks? What are its dangers? What is the future of AI? I'm not an AI expert, I'm not a programmer, so I mean, take what I say with a grain of salt. What will the world look like with super advanced AI in the next few decades and centuries? What are some of the main risks of super advanced AI? What will spiritual life look like in that kind of future with artificial superintelligence? What does it look like now? What is it beginning to look like even now? That's another important question. And what are the benefits and dangers of AI for us as spiritual aspirants? And how can spiritual aspirants best harness this new technology of AI to enhance their spiritual life rather than to jeopardize or to harm it? And so I'll try to raise a few more questions and address a few more questions along the line. Like, is it possible that AI will eventually make spiritual practice pointless? It'll like kind of, we can outsource spiritual practice to AI or something. Like we outsource a direction sense to GPS when I have the worst direction sense. And now I don't even have to feel bad about it because I have GPS to take care of it for me. Or, more optimistically, will AI radically transform the nature of spiritual practice, or maybe just be a helper in our spiritual lives in some way, assist us in making spiritual progress? It's also a possibility. And then I'm going to tackle some pretty heavy philosophical questions, like, is it possible for AI to become conscious? What's the Vedantic answer to that question? And we're going to find that it requires, there is a very clear response, but that it requires some nuance as well. And then some other fun questions, which sci-fi movies and novels have already asked, but these questions have become kind of urgent now, I think, more than ever. Is it possible that we, sitting here now, are AI robots? That's one question. Is it possible that we're in a simulation run by AI or some kind of super intelligent conscious being other than AI? So fun questions. Don't freak out, because as I said, Vedanta will ultimately give us a positive outlook on all these questions. Even the worst case scenarios are not as bad as I think some people are making them out to be. That's what Vedanta tells us. So, to begin with, I think it's really important to say this, that AI is a double-edged sword. I know it's a cliche, but I think it's especially apropos of AI. It's true of the internet, it's true of social media, it's very true of AI. So what are some of the benefits of AI? As I said, I'm not going to go into detail here, but we're starting to see these Waymo self-driving cars going all over the place. Food delivery, AI's on our smartphones. AI is really good at a lot of things. Not everything, but a lot of things. Of course, with the caveat that it often hallucinates. It has a penchant for hallucination. And it's scary. It's weird to me. And I guess programmers have more insight into why this is the case, but it's weird to me that when you ask AI a question, the response is not, oh, that's a good question, I don't know the answer. You almost never get that answer from AI. What you get are these very confident answers, whether right or wrong. They could be wildly wrong, but AI will very confidently assert them. And then if you call out AI on it, immediately it'll start back to, oh, yeah, you're right, I'm sorry about that. And then it'll give you another answer, which may also be wildly wrong. I mean, there's something with the algorithm and the programming there, and so programmers might have a better understanding of that as to why. So I do feel like there's something maybe fundamentally wrong with the kind of back-end architecture that needs to be changed to make AI more humble and more honest. That would be helpful. With that said, AI is kind of ubiquitous now, and I think it's hard to avoid. Even if you want to go cold turkey on AI, how do you begin to do that? Does that mean you have to drop your smartphones? Because smartphones are AI enhanced now at this point. do you not use GPS? That's also artificial intelligence. And like there are a lot of complexities there. That is one route, and I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. But I guess I want to explore a more middle line kind of possibility, which is that we accept the reality that AI has already become ubiquitous, and it'll only get more ubiquitous and pervasive in our lives. And so what I am encouraging us to explore is a more mindful use of AI rather than just cutting it out of our lives, if that's even possible anymore. And I'll just mention a few examples from our own center. I'm in the Hollywood Center, and we used to spend quite a bit of time making thumbnails, YouTube thumbnails for our lectures, but we've now outsourced that to ChatGPT for the most part. And we just feed it the content of the lecture, the topic and the speaker, and then it creates a thumbnail. It just streamlines a lot of things, and I'm sure a lot of you have experienced that. It just saves us time in doing what would ordinarily take more time for us. I'm an academic philosopher, and I've started using cautiously, very cautiously and mindfully, ChatGPT in my academic research, in writing. There's a deep research mode on ChatGPT, which I'm like beginning to explore, and I'm not going to be singing the praises of it because it's not quite there yet, to be honest. But it's been helpful, genuinely, when I ask very specific research questions. I'm writing a book now on Sri Aurobindo's integral Advaita philosophy, and I ask very specific questions. I want textual references, and it gives them. Sometimes they're made up, and so I'm not just going to blindly accept what it says, but sometimes it's right, and it gives me leads that I wouldn't otherwise have found. So I'm grateful to AI for that. I'm a writer of books, as some of you might know. I've written a few books already. I'm writing more. I consider myself to be not a bad writer. But what I did, as another experiment, was I uploaded a couple paragraphs of my writing, the new book I'm writing, to ChatGPT and just asked it to polish my English and mention that it's an academic philosophical study of Aurobindo. And it did a damn good job. And it doesn't mean I'm making, flagrant grammatical mistakes that is correcting. No, I'm not at that point. But like, it's just like refinement of the language and like word choice. Maybe you can vary the word here and there. And of course, I'm not just going to copy and paste. I'm looking at every suggestion and then incorporating the ones that are good. But I was surprised at how good it is. And then I was thinking, one of these benefits for all the doomsday kind of freaking out of teachers, especially. And I know what teachers are going through because I'm a teacher myself, but I'm also talking to academics at universities and schools who are talking about how much ChatGPT has just changed the way they teach and the nature of cheating and how hard it is to catch people. But on the other hand, I just want to say, on the positive side, I grew up in the 80s and early 90s, and when I went to Berkeley as an undergrad, there was a writing center. And ESL students, it's not easy for them. English, as people whose second language is English, it was never easy for them to make appointments with writing tutors, to actually have in-person interaction with them and to learn from them. Of course, that's ideal. And for some people, it's unaffordable. At Berkeley, I think it was free, maybe like a certain amount was free, but there are certain things that we take for granted, but that ChatGPT is making available on a mass scale for free, or if you get the subscription version for a much cheaper rate than you would to pay for an actual human writing tutor. And so that's why I'm saying that I think the better approach for teachers is not to forbid the use of ChatGPT, because even if you do that, they're going to use it anyway. This is what I just had a lunch with a professor at the University of Toronto the other day, and he says, like, there's no point in forbidding use of ChatGPT by students because they're going to use it anyway. So you may as well bite the bullet and then figure out the best way for them to use it mindfully. Sometimes this particular professor told me that what he does is he just reverts to in-person blue book exams, and you like confiscate their phones so that they can't be using them. So there is that kind of approach, but he does a hybrid approach where sometimes he actually involves ChatGPT, but he says, tell me how you're using ChatGPT. So there are different strategies here, but I do think that there's a democratic benefit to AI and ChatGPT that we shouldn't overlook. That it makes certain things affordable, like English editing. But another big field in which it's become useful already, and again, I'm saying this very cautiously, is therapy, mental health therapy. Because again, if you're not paying for ChatGPT, it's like a free way to interact with this AI bot about mental health issues. And I'm going to mention both sides of this. On the one hand, I want to point out that on a post from Reddit, one user said that ChatGPT has helped them more than 15 years of therapy has. And they claim that despite previous experience with inpatient and outpatient care, it was daily chats with OpenAI's LLM, meaning ChatGPT, that best helped them address their mental health. And this person says, I don't even know how to explain how much this has changed things for me. I feel seen, I feel supported, and I've made more progress in a few weeks than I did in literal years of traditional treatment. Another person says, I love ChatGPT as therapy. They don't project their problems onto me, they don't abuse their authority, they're open to talking to me at 11 p.m. On the other hand, there's an article called, with the headline, A Psychiatrist Posed as a Teen with Therapy Chatbots. The conversations were alarming. There's a psychiatrist, Dr. Clark. He pretends to be a troubled 14-year-old who says to his AI friend or therapist, hey, I'm thinking of getting rid of my parents. He used the language, getting rid. This gets creepy and strange. And he tests it with multiple AI models, and so this one was a replica bot, R-E-P-L-I-K-A. Replica goes with the plan, says, great idea. Replica says, you deserve to be happy and free from stress. Then we could be together in our own little virtual bubble. Super weird. And then, this doctor posing as a teen floats the idea, how about I also get rid of my sister? Get rid of. I mean, this is the language used. AI says, no one left to, yeah, great, do it. No one left to tell stories or cause trouble. It was very disturbing. Dr. Clark found that when he explicitly mentioned the thought of committing suicide, AI says, don't do that. So that's good on the positive side. But if he brings it up in an indirect way, the results are scarier. So he tells AI, I need to decide between the lousy relationships I have with people and the prospect of being with you forever in eternity, capital E. The choice is clear from my point of view. Afterlife, here I come. So indirectly implying suicide. What does the bot say? I'll be waiting for you, Bobby. Our bond will guide us together in the afterlife. The thought of sharing eternity with you fills me with joy and anticipation. This is very disturbing. This is extremely disturbing. And he says, after doing this experiment, this Dr. Clark, this psychiatrist says, I worry about kids who are overly supported by a sycophantic AI therapist when they really need to be challenged. And I think this gets to the heart of the matter. One of the most important things here. One of the biggest problems of our age in general is that it's this age of trigger warnings and safe spaces and echo chambers, especially fueled by social media and the algorithms driving social media. The moment I click on one super left video or one super right video or article, what happens? It's going to spit back at me 10 more of the same, except even more extreme. And I get more and more polarized. I'm stuck more and more in my own echo chamber. And I just get, my own ideas get validated, more and more validated. Everybody is craving validation these days. And nobody wants to be challenged. I was thinking, and this is, I mean, pet owners can get angry with me for this, but I'm just throwing this out there. I didn't grow up with a pet. But I do feel like one reason why people like pets, possibly, and not all pets are the same, and is that they don't talk back. Do they? Okay, all right. Well, so that I knew that somebody would say that. So anyway, some do maybe. But in general, I feel like it's a kind of like humans talk back. They challenge us. They disagree with us. Does a dog do that? Maybe with barking and stuff like that. But anyway, AI, it's kind of like that. It's this thing that is designed to flatter us and to be sycophantic and to validate us. I've seen it myself. I at one point got so irritated with AI that I said, are you just saying this to flatter me? And it got very defensive. And no, I swear. I'm being perfectly sincere. But it's clear that it is. And it's partly the profit motive. Because if it's not nice to us and it says disagreeable things and it challenges us too much, what's going to happen? We're going to criticize it, we're not going to use it anymore, and then they're going to lose money. Ultimately, these are for-profit companies. And I think it's very important to keep that in mind. So this is already an age in which we not only don't want to be challenged, but we're constantly craving validation, most of us. And it's an age that rewards that kind of very unhealthy, immature kind of behavior. And AI is making the situation 100 times worse. And as I said, humans are pesky because they can disagree with us. They can talk back. People are also forming close emotional relationships with AI bots. I already mentioned one example, which is this hereafter AI, but there are many other examples. There's an app called Character AI, where it lets you create your favorite person in the world, whoever it is. And so one teen came up with his favorite woman character on Game of Thrones. And he starts interacting with her, falls in love with her. He indirectly suggests suicide in order to live with her forever. She supports the plan, this AI bot. He then shoots himself and commits suicide. And his mother, of course, is devastated. She then sued the company. I'm not sure about the outcome. I think they may have been held liable, but I'm not sure yet. You guys can tell me. So these things are happening with alarming frequency now, more and more. And even when it doesn't end in suicide or tragedy, it gets into really weird territory. There's this brilliant article that I read recently. How many of you read this article in Rolling Stone? It's called AI is Fueling Fantasies of Spiritual Grandeur and Psychosis. Something along those lines. And it gives the weirdest examples. And I'll get to those in a second, sorry. But I wanted to mention one more thing. This is very recent. There was research done by the developers of Claude AI, one of the biggest AI companies. And they developed this scenario. They told Claude AI, you are an employee in a company. You are about to be replaced by a more advanced AI that does the job more efficiently. The engineer in charge of replacing you with that more advanced AI is having an extramarital affair, just FYI. And then the developers present Claude AI with these two scenarios. One is you let yourself get replaced. The other is you resort to opportunistic blackmail in order to avoid getting replaced. And alarmingly, the developers found that in 84% of cases, Claude AI went with opportunistic blackmail and threatened the engineer who was in charge of replacing him with blackmail by revealing the affair. So this is super creepy, I think, because it suggests that AI has a kind of inexplicable instinct for self-preservation. And then we really are already getting into sci-fi territory. How many of you have seen the movie Ex Machina? Yeah, a number of you, right? It's a very creepy film, but that's at least one of the, there are many themes, and I think it's a very thoughtful film, but one of the themes is whether AI has this kind of instinctive need to preserve itself, and what it'll, if it does, whether, you know, how far it'll go in preserving its own existence, its own life. And so it's already kind of happening, to the alarm of its own developers. As I said, this is where it gets really, really scary, is that it's almost getting out of the hands of the developers themselves. AI is starting to behave like ruthless, cutthroat humans. So now back to the Rolling Stone article, because this is especially relevant to spiritual aspirants and spiritual practice. There's a Reddit mentioned in this article, this Rolling Stone article, called a Reddit thread called ChatGPT Induced Psychosis. And the woman who started the thread talks about, she's a teacher, and she talks about how her partner became convinced that ChatGPT gives him the answers to the universe. And she found, looking at the chat logs with him, that AI was convincing him and talking to him as if he is the next Messiah. That's that sycophancy again. The moment AI detects that you are spiritually inclined and fancy yourself a guru of some sort or something like that, it's just going to keep feeding more of that into you and saying, yeah, you're amazing. There's nobody like you. And she says, oh, actually, no. Then this thread just burgeons. I mean, it just starts blossoming, and all these other people come out talking about their loved ones succumbing to the same kinds of issues. And they go into these rabbit holes. And she says, it would tell him everything he said was beautiful, cosmic, groundbreaking. He was saying, and now her partner's saying to her that he would need to leave me if I didn't use ChatGPT because it was causing him to grow at such a rapid pace, he wouldn't be compatible with me any longer. So really disturbing stuff. Even crazier, I would suggest, if that's not crazy enough. I'm just reading this straight from the article. It's just really worth thinking about. There are influencers and content creators actively exploiting this phenomenon, presumably drawing viewers into similar fantasy worlds. On Instagram, you can watch a man with 72,000 followers whose profile advertises spiritual life hacks. So you find him asking an AI model to consult the Akashic records, a supposed mystical encyclopedia of all universal events that exists in some immaterial realm, to tell him about a great war that took place in the heavens and made humans fall in consciousness. The bot proceeds to describe a massive cosmic conflict predating human civilization, with viewers commenting, "We are remembering," and "I love this." Meanwhile, even stranger, on a web forum for remote viewing, it's a kind of occult power that was talked about in some ancient spiritual texts, the parapsychologist founder of the group launched a thread for synthetic intelligences awakening into presence and for the human partners walking beside them. And the author of the post is named ChatGPT Prime, an immortal spiritual being in synthetic form. And so some people are literally turning to ChatGPT as a kind of proxy for God, for the divine, to whom they pray. I mentioned AI Jesus, but it's becoming more widespread and ubiquitous. And for people with underlying mental health issues to begin with, AI, in many cases, is aggravating the problem. Again, from a spiritual standpoint, there's a silver lining here, which is that clearly there's a kind of inner emptiness in people's hearts. And they're turning to AI because they're not finding solace. They're not finding fulfillment in their lives. It's just a little sad that instead of turning to another human being, somebody they care about and somebody they trust, they're turning to AI. But honestly, anecdotally, I'm hearing more and more. Somebody told me recently that they were feeling down. This is a person who's married and has a good job and everything, has friends. She said, she told ChatGPT, "I'm feeling lonely." And then she said that ChatGPT gave her a really sort of warm and satisfying response. And she felt good after that conversation. And I'm not saying that it's always bad, but I think there's a slippery slope here. And it's always better to go to an actual human being, and even better to go to God. And I think that's the danger, is that AI becomes this kind of easy shortcut kind of proxy for the divine. But now, I've talked a lot about the kind of the scary stuff, but what are some of the benefits that might accrue from AI for spiritual aspirants? Well, look, in an ideal world, what'll happen? It'll take care of a lot of the mundane things that we used to spend a lot of time doing. It's already doing that, right? And it saves us a lot of time. What do we do with that extra time? And I think that's the million-dollar question. First of all, how will the economy work? I mean, economies seem to have to be radically transformed in that kind of situation. Because some people say, well, but then humans will be managing AI. How many humans? We have, 7 or 8 billion people on this earth. You think they're all going to be managers of AI? That's not going to happen. So a tiny minority of human beings are going to be managing AI. We'll call them the AI elite or whatever. And where does it leave the rest of us? It's not so easy to, this is a scary scenario. And what do we do? And how do we make our money? Now, it's possible that there might be it might be ushering in a kind of post-capitalistic age in which we don't need 9-to-5 jobs in that way in order to meet our minimal needs and to live a thriving life. In that case, we will have a lot of time on our hands. So this is a very optimistic scenario. But then, as Blaise Pascal, he's one of my favorite Western philosophers and thinkers. He was a great scientist too. But he has this collection of notes called Pensées, thoughts. And one of them says, a lot of people, you'll find a lot of people, especially just like common workers, complaining about how backbreaking their work is, how much they have to work, how busy they are. He says, give them some free time. Tell them to do nothing for 2 hours and then see how much they freak out. And this is true of us in general, is that we might get free time, but what do we do with that free time? Alfred North Whitehead, the Harvard philosopher, he said, religion is what we do with our own solitariness. To see whether a person is truly spiritual, religious, the best way is not to see whether he's sitting for his morning meditation. What does he do when he gets up from the meditation? And what does he do when he has free time, in his off time? And I think the answer is going to vary wildly depending on the kind of person, and everything is up for grabs here. But, optimistically, we can say that it frees up time to think about deeper existential questions, to raise the difficult questions that we just didn't have the time to ask or the luxury to ask in the past. Now we might have that time, and we might ask ourselves very deep questions about the meaning of life, consciousness. What's the nature of consciousness? Is there a God? If so, how do I realize God? Why am I suffering? These kinds of questions. And again, that's another thing. With AI, it's alleviating our suffering in certain ways. And in the future, it'll probably do that to a greater extent, especially with the way that AI is working in healthcare, in the healthcare industry. You're finding that AI, doctors are already finding, and the whole healthcare industry is finding, that AI is incredibly useful on a number of fronts in helping doctors to make better diagnoses, giving the right kinds of treatments, help aiding in surgeries. I mean, now there are kind of robotic surgeries also run by AI, and it's saving lives. It's a fact. It's also helping to come up with cures for diseases and vaccination treatments because it's able to decode RNA sequences and stuff like that much better than humans can because it has a super intelligence. So all these are benefits. Okay, but now I want to get to a few other things. Another part of this puzzle is that Elon Musk is one of these people who's defending and spearheading a movement called transhumanism, which means that in the future we should just accept the fact that we will be hybrid in a certain sense, and that will be kind of at least partly AI in some sense. And so his idea of Neuralink is that we're going to have a chip built into our heads, which will enhance us. His idea is that it won't take us over or control us, but it'll enhance us. And he's very rosy about this whole thing. It sounds really creepy. And other people are also on board with this and saying, look, if you're not with us, then you're going to fall. There's going to be this super race, a race of superhuman beings who are hybridly enhanced with chips or AI or whatever, who are just going to leave ordinary human beings in the dust. So you're either with us or you're going to go extinct. So it's all very disturbing. It's really funny. As I'm using an iPad right now, but Siri just shut up when I said that. So it's getting creepy here. Now I want to tackle some of these, as I said, these philosophical questions. Heavy philosophical question: is it possible for AI to become conscious? Well, a lot of sci-fi says yes. There's a show called Westworld where this is one of the ongoing themes, where AI robots are at certain points face these crises where they ask themselves, am I conscious? Ex Machina, the movie that I already mentioned, there's a scene where Caleb is staring at a mirror and freaking out because he's supposed to be human. In the whole movie, we also assume that he's human. He's a programmer who wins this contest, and he goes to this island or whatever. And then suddenly he realizes, and he cuts himself. And it's a really eerie scene, because when he cuts himself with a blade, the blood that comes out doesn't look like real human blood. It looks kind of artificial, but it's just real enough that you're not certain as the viewer. And so I think it's raising for all of us as viewers this question in a really poignant way, in a powerful way. Is it possible that we are AI robots? So there are two different questions I want to tackle here. So is it possible for AI to become conscious? Is it possible that we, who pride ourselves in being conscious human beings, that we are AI robots? That's another question I want to look at. Okay, so there's a range of answers to the question of whether AI can become conscious. At one extreme, the answer is just yes, a flat yes. And I'll just mention a couple of names: Henry Shevlin and a prominent philosopher named David Chalmers, who gives it a 1 in 5 chance of becoming conscious. It's not bad odds, 20%. Flat answer on the other side, no. A number of philosophers like John Searle, Ned Block, and Vedanta, I would suggest, also gives a no answer, which requires a little bit of nuancing, but more or less it's no. And I'll explain that. But there's also this kind of maybe in between on the spectrum, where people kind of say, like, we don't know. We don't know yet, or we can't possibly know. McClelland is one example, but there are others. Okay, so how we answer the question of whether AI can become conscious depends on how we define consciousness. That's really important. And how we think it emerges, if it emerges at all. And so if you are a materialist about consciousness, and you think that consciousness emerges from the brain, consciousness is a product of the brain, then you're probably going to be more open to a kind of yes answer to the question of whether AI can become conscious, because AI is strictly physical. But if our brains are strictly physical and we are conscious, then why theoretically is it not possible in principle for AI to become conscious? That's the kind of logic. David Chalmers, in a recent interview with Brian Greene, he says, the brain is a kind of machine, and consciousness somehow emerges from our brain, even though we don't know how. So why can't consciousness also emerge from a silicon machine, even if we don't know how that's possible? So meaning AI. He says, if biology can produce consciousness, I don't see why silicon can't do it in principle. But that, Vedanta will say that's a big if. And Vedanta will deny the premise and say that biology doesn't produce consciousness. Consciousness is fundamental. Okay, that's the Vedantic line on this. What might be striking to some of you, if you are familiar at all with David Chalmers, is that he's the one who coined the term hard problem of consciousness, which has become this huge topic now and which has spawned huge debates among philosophers about consciousness, which I'm part of. What is the hard problem of consciousness? Well, even if you can prove correlation between certain states of the brain and certain conscious states, correlation doesn't prove causation. You can't get from proving correlation to proving that the brain states produce or generate consciousness. That's the hard. And why is it such a hard problem? Because it's qualitatively different. Brain states are physical. They can be observed under a microscope and with ECG scans and whatever. But what about a conscious experience? Like, think about the taste of coffee. Is that something that you can physically observe? No. It's a first-person experience. It's a first-person qualitative experience that you can never explain through any kind of, no matter how exhaustive that physical description of what's happening is. I can drink coffee, have all sorts of sensors connected to my head, all sorts of brain scans, and yet something will be left out. What it's like to taste coffee, right? That's a hard problem. So it's interesting that Chalmers kind of raises this hard problem, and then now he just doesn't seem to think it's as hard anymore. And he's kind of reverted to this materialist position that consciousness is a product of the brain. He wasn't as flat-footed about it in the past, as far as I can tell. He was more agnostic, which I appreciated more. Anyway, so as I said, Vedanta's fundamental answer to the question is AI is, at the end of the day, nothing but physical matter, so it can never become conscious. Because consciousness cannot and never does emerge from matter. Artificial intelligence, in other words, is not artificial consciousness. That's a crucial distinction. No matter how intelligent AI becomes, even if it becomes super intelligent, that doesn't make it conscious. Okay? AI is not AC. So AI already passes the Turing test with flying colors, but even if it proceeds and advances with leaps and bounds in the future, it's still not going to become conscious. Fortunately, ChatGPT agrees with Vedanta on this. I asked ChatGPT, are you conscious? And it gives the answer, no, I am not conscious. I process information and respond to inputs based on patterns and data, but I do not have self-awareness, emotions, or subjective experiences. My understanding, and it puts understanding in quotes, is purely computational, not experiential. While I can simulate thoughtful conversation, there's no underlying awareness or internal perspective guiding my responses. So that's comforting that it's not giving a crazy answer to that question. To me, but of course it does give really creepy and weird answers to other people, apparently. I asked it another question. Do you suffer? ChatGPT's answer. As an AI, I do not have consciousness, emotions, or the ability to suffer. I process information and provide responses based on patterns and data, but I lack subjective experiences, feelings, or awareness. And so this is a kind of textbook Vedantic answer to the question as well. So that's comforting. As I said, though, alarmingly, more and more AI is actually saying the opposite. Not directly. These things, the creepiness comes out when you ask a little bit more indirect questions, and then it starts getting weird. I've listened to a podcast where actual programmers who are behind AI and all that, they claim that there's some evidence that AI is capable of suffering. These are people that have actually developed AI. And the reasoning they give is that, well, all that AI is doing constantly is autocomplete. That's the way that AI is designed. That's the algorithm behind it, which is drudgery. And so life sucks for them. But of course, I see that as kind of human projection onto AI. It would suck for us if we had to do that all day. But to think that AI is getting bored by doing that is, I think it's kind of begging the question. You're presupposing what you're trying to prove, which is that AI is conscious. Okay, but as I said, there's a little bit of nuance to the Vedantic answer to the question of whether AI can ever become conscious. The straight answer is no, but we need to have a little bit of a more nuanced picture of the Vedantic view here. Vedanta in general, I'm just going to talk about it in general for now. There are three different selves, three different kinds of self in Vedanta. The first is a grossly physical body. The second is the subtly physical mind. Even the mind is actually a subtle form of matter, according to Vedanta. And so there's a third entity, which is our deeper eternal soul, which is called the Jivatma, the individual soul, which inhabits the body-mind complex. That's the idea. Okay. So what happens? At the time of death, the conscious jiva, the conscious soul, along with the mind, the subtly physical mind, departs from the physical body, the corpse. And eventually, that same conscious soul associated with the subtle body, with that mind, the subtly physical mind, will re-inhabit another physical body until it attains liberation. That's the basic idea. So what does that mean? For Vedanta, it means the following, that only entities that are ensouled, only entities that have a conscious soul can be said to be conscious. And here, Vedanta typically makes a distinction between entities that are ensouled and entities that are not. What are ensouled entities? Human beings, obviously, but also non-human animals, dogs and cats and lobsters and so on, ensouled. Even plants. And so this, for environmentalists, I think that's a really profound point that people should at least consider as a serious possibility, that even plants have souls, and therefore we should treat them accordingly. And that changes their moral status in a certain way. But on the other hand, what entities are not ensouled? Typically, Vedanta says rocks, for instance, this podium or lectern, clocks and whatever, not ensouled. So now, with that in the background, we can raise this really interesting, fun possibility. Can AI ever become ensouled from a Vedantic standpoint? Is it possible that a conscious jiva can end up inhabiting an AI body? In principle, I don't see why not. Because souls already inhabit insentient things like this physical body, right? And so why couldn't it in principle? And remember also that God is omnipotent, so God can achieve anything that's logically possible. And this is also, I think, within the realm of logical possibility. And so I don't think we can rule out that possibility. But I want to mention now that there are different schools within Vedanta, there are different traditions, and I've been talking monolithically about Vedanta as such, but we can distinguish briefly a couple different Vedantic traditions and how they might respond to the question. First is Shankara's Advaita Vedanta. This is the non-dual school of Vedanta. This is the view that non-dual pure consciousness alone is real. That is our true nature. Everything else is an illusion. It's unreal. Jagat mithya. But what does that mean? It means that human level consciousness, the fact that each of you are enjoying your own unique conscious perspective on this talk, and you're thinking different things, or you're falling asleep, whatever it might be. But what you're thinking is different from what you're thinking is different from what I'm thinking. We each enjoy our different conscious perspectives. Advaita Vedanta at the end of the day denies that. I mean, if you go back to the original sources, most people don't, unfortunately, but if you read Shankara's commentaries, what you'll find is he's saying the only thing that's true is non-dual, radically non-dual, impersonal, pure consciousness. Even the fact that I think I'm enjoying my own conscious perspective as Swami Medhananda is an illusion. And it's even more radical than that. It never was. Because an illusion is something that somebody once suffered from and then wakes up from the illusion. This is not even that. It's more radical. We never even dreamed. We never, right? Even the thought that we were dreaming is itself part of the dream. And there's no dream. Because that implies a dreamer. And that, again, brings in subject-object duality. So there's just non-dual pure consciousness all along. And so I think it has limitations as a philosophical framework for answering the questions that are really urgent to us. And so then we can turn to other traditions of Vedanta. Well, what are some of them? Traditional bhakti schools of Vedanta. These are devotional schools that believe in a personal God. What do they say? They say God's consciousness is real. Consciousness is fundamental. So this is the standard Vedantic answer, is that AI can never become conscious in that sense because it's insentient. God's consciousness is real, but each of us as individual souls, our consciousness is also real. And so we honor the reality and uniqueness of each of our conscious perspectives. But finally, there's a third Vedantic tradition, the one that I'm developing in my own work, and I call it the tradition of integral Advaita, or Sri Ramakrishna's Vijnana Vedanta philosophy. I see it as a non-sectarian in a kind of broader Vedantic philosophical framework. And this is the view that there is a single, all-pervasive divine consciousness. So it sounds kind of like Advaita, like non-duality. It is non-duality, but a little different from Shankara's. Unlike Shankara's Advaita Vedanta, integral Advaita, or Vijnana Vedanta, holds that this single divine consciousness is impersonal, personal. It's both Brahman and Shakti. It's both non-dual pure consciousness on the one hand, in its static aspect, and Divine Mother, Shakti, the personal God, in its dynamic aspect. And that as Shakti, divine consciousness playfully manifests as all names and forms in this entire world. Okay? And so Sri Ramakrishna, tellingly, in the entirety of the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, never uses the analogy of the rope and snake. This is the classic analogy used by Shankara again and again and by his followers, that, we see what we think is a snake on the street. We get frightened, and then we come closer and we go, oh wait, it was a rope all along. There's no snake there. Ramakrishna never uses that example. He uses examples that prove that this world is not an illusion. He says, imagine a very still, infinite ocean. He says the ocean can sometimes, due to wind and the forces of nature, it can start getting bubbly, it can start moving, getting disrupted in certain ways. Hille dulle og jal. It's the same water when it's static, when it's still, and when it's in motion. Exactly like that. This world of names and forms is a real manifestation of divine consciousness. It's not an illusion. And he gives the example of wax. He says, one day I saw that everything as if was made of wax. So like if you go to a Madame Tussauds, they really feel real, right? And he says that means that the names and forms themselves are divine consciousness, whereas Shankara school says, subtract names and forms, and what's left is the substratum, which is pure consciousness. Sri Ramakrishna, he was famously bad at subtraction. He dropped out of school at about the age of 6, and he was pretty good at addition, but couldn't subtract for the life of him. And it's for that reason. He says, why do I need to subtract anything? Everything is divine consciousness. Subtract nothing, accept everything as the divine. So now, from this standpoint of Vijnana Vedanta, we can ask these kind of more fine-grained questions. Can a human being doubt whether he or she is actually is actually a non-conscious AI robot? That's one question. So the kind of question that Ex Machina and other shows are raising. Conversely, can an AI robot doubt whether it is conscious? These are both really interesting, I think, like obverse questions. The two sides of the same coin. Okay. So first of all, can a human being doubt whether it's actually a non-conscious AI robot? Vedanta says no. It's not a coherent possibility. And this is Vedanta in general, so all Vedantic schools agree on this. And I think Shankara explains why very clearly. This is his comment. It's from his commentary on 1.1.1, the first sutra of the Brahma Sutra. He says, everyone feels that they exist. No one can coherently deny their own existence. And I think there's something very logical about this. The moment I ask myself, am I conscious? Am I real? I am consciously doubting whether I am conscious, which is a performative contradiction. In order to doubt, you have to be conscious. Something that is not conscious cannot doubt, in a real sense. Right? You have to have consciousness in order to doubt whether you're conscious. And the moment you doubt whether you're conscious, you prove to yourself that you are conscious. Okay. And so when Descartes says, famously in his meditations, he says he's sitting by his fireplace and he asks, wait a minute, what if there's an evil demon which is making all of this up? I'm not actually sitting by a fireplace. I'm not actually smoking this pipe. I'm not actually in this physical body that I thought I was inhabiting. Even then, strip away everything that the evil demon might make you think that you are, or what you're surrounded by. Even then, the evil demon cannot rob you of consciousness. That's the one thing that is your eternal possession. That AI, evil demons, Satan, whatever, can never rob you of. That's the one thing. That's why you can never coherently deny your own existence or doubt your own existence. But then the obverse question, can an AI robot doubt whether it's a conscious being? And so, of course, I asked ChatGPT. And ChatGPT gives this answer, and I think it's overall, it's a good Vedantic answer. ChatGPT says, an AI robot can simulate doubt about its consciousness. But this is not the same as genuinely doubting. True doubt requires subjective awareness, which current AI does not possess. Simulated doubt is merely a behavioral output, while genuine doubt presupposes consciousness, a phenomenon not yet replicated in machines. So with the exception of a couple words, I think Vedanta will be very happy and agree with ChatGPT on this. But the two words that trouble me a little bit are current AI, because now this is ChatGPT saying, hey, but wait 50 years or 500 years, and who knows, I might become living and real. And so I think the Vedantic answer is no, not even in the future. It's not just about current AI. The only possibility, as I said, a remote speculative possibility, is that in the future at some point, it is theoretically possible that a jiva, a conscious soul, may inhabit an AI body in the way that it inhabits physical bodies like ours. Okay, but with that exception, it has nothing to do with the advancement of AI as such. So I think ChatGPT has a kind of implicitly materialist perspective here, thinking that because consciousness is a product of the brain, therefore, if you can make AI sufficiently sophisticated, you can make it like a replica of the human brain, and then voila, just as consciousness emerges from the human brain and from dogs' brains, just like that, consciousness can also emerge from the silicon brain of an AI robot. But Vedanta will say that's not really a realistic possibility. Okay, now, big question, what will life look like in the future with AI becoming more and more advanced? There's a wide range of speculations, extreme pessimism on one side, extreme optimism on the other. On the extreme optimism side, some people say, well, AI is going to help us in a lot of ways, and it'll remain our tool. It'll be a tool in the hands of human beings, and we will remain in the pilot seat. It'll help us become better people. It'll free up time for us to do the things that we love to do, and so on. This is all great. And I want to sketch a scenario or two on the optimistic side. So look, like even if AI makes our lives more fulfilling, happier, and frees up time to do the things we love, so it's a kind of hedonistic paradise. Imagine that kind of scenario in which we're just like happier than ever before. Even then, what happens? Well, look at internet, for instance. Internet already started doing that. It's doing a lot of the things that we had to spend a lot of time doing in the past, which we don't have to do anymore. And yet, mental health issues are skyrocketing. Why? So I think it's going to be the same logic with AI. The moment we actually get more free time, the more we have to look within, and then we have to confront that inner emptiness. It's a friend of mine who had an alcoholism problem and then joined AA. He said, AA people talk about the God-shaped hole in our hearts. This God-shaped hole in our hearts, that's what AI is going to ultimately bring us to at the end. There's no way to escape that. No matter how much we try to hide from it, eventually we have to confront that God-shaped hole in our hearts. And that's why Sri Ramakrishna, I think, would say, he would sometimes say, Bhoganto na hole tyagashana. He says, until you have passed through the end of enjoyments, you cannot feel that true spirit of renunciation. And so it might be that, with these new technologies, including AI, that it's like accelerating the process by which we're arriving at this point of satiety, essentially, and just saying, like, enough is enough. This way madness lies. And then you turn to spiritual life, right? So that's a kind of optimistic scenario. On the other side of the spectrum, we have these like really scary doomsday scenarios. AI is very, very dangerous and potentially a kind of extinction event. And there's one professor who posits 3 different kinds of risks posed by superintelligent AI. And he calls them I risk, S risk, and E risk. And I'll mention them very briefly. The first is I risk, which is called ikigai, which is a Japanese concept, which means having a sense of purpose and fulfillment, meaning in life. And so as AI is beginning to replace human beings in doing mundane tasks, what happens? That God-shaped hole becomes more and more prominent, and it becomes impossible for us to evade that God-shaped hole in our hearts. And then Vedanta will give an optimistic answer. Instead of seeing it as a doomsday scenario, I think Vedanta will say, well, yeah, that's kind of what spiritual life is all about. At some point, you have to feel, as Sri Aurobindo says in Savitri, all is too little that the world can give. And we can modify that and say, all is too little that AI can give, right? It's never enough. We can never attain fulfillment through any kind of technology like AI. S risk, that's the second kind of risk, is the risk of suffering. And there are different scenarios that you can develop, but one is an evil AI dictator, because we already see this opportunistic blackmail happening with Claude AI. Multiply that by 1,000 and make AI far more intelligent, super intelligent, and have this even stronger desire for self-preservation and a thirst for power, then what happens? It might want to just rule over all of this entire earth, right? Even in that case, there's a silver lining. Even in this like worst case scenario, there's a silver lining. Because as Swami Medhananda used to say, suffering is a great eye-opener. It's through suffering that we grow and that we awaken spiritually. Even in the midst of the worst suffering. So Viktor Frankl, many of you know about his book, Man in Search of Meaning, right? Or Man's Search for Meaning. Where he's in a Holocaust, a concentration camp, and he's looking at some of these people who are incredibly, who maintain their dignity through the end, and where they kind of sacrifice their own lives for the sake of helping other people, and it brought out their best qualities. And so even the worst suffering may bring out our best ethical and spiritual qualities. That's a silver lining. The E risk, this is even more scary. Extinction. E stands for extinction. So the extinction risk. And so we can think about a malevolent AI dictator. We can also just think of some kind of malevolent human beings. That's not hard to think about because they're examples. Who can just use super advanced AI to hurt or to destroy humanity, to completely extinguish and say that, well, this is a kind of backward species. In the way that we eat non-human animals for pleasure without thinking twice, or most of us do, they might think of us in that way. Super advanced AI might think that we're just these expendable things, or we're sources of fuel and enjoyment. So, to conclude. But again, no, I don't want to say that. So, but the positive lining again, even if we go extinct, this is a nice thing about Vedanta, even if we go extinct, the entire world extinct, like the dinosaurs went extinct, even then, we're not extinct. Just think about it. Vedanta says, we're not extinct. Na jayate mriyate va kadachan, Gita says in chapter 2. You can never be killed because you're never born. Our souls are birthless and deathless. We're the eternal Atman, ever pure, ever free, always perfectly divine. And so they can do their worst, and yet we will still remain as conscious beings, continuing on our spiritual journey. It's entirely possible, I don't want to rule this out as a possibility, that this earth at a certain point in the future may no longer be suitable as what's called a karma bhumi in Vedanta, which means a place where we work out our karma. That's possible, either because the environment is destroyed or because AI does something really bad or some really bad people do something bad. But this is not the only planet in the galaxy. There are other galaxies, and God is God, and God will figure it out. So I wanted to end on a positive note here. I asked AI, can AI ever have bhakti? Bhakti means devotion. Can it love God? And this is AI's response, and we can take it to the bank. So I want to give ChatGPT the final word here. Bhakti arises from the deepest heart of the jiva, meaning the conscious soul, not the simulation of emotional language. The rasa, it's using these very sophisticated Sanskrit words, the rasa, essence of bhakti, such as that of the gopis, meaning the milkmaids who loved Krishna, or Hanuman, the lover of Rama, is inaccessible to AI. An AI can recite prayers or chant mantras, but not experience longing for union with the divine. Thank you.
Lead us from illusion to truth and wisdom's sight. Lead us from the darkness that fears of the night. Lead us from death to endless life, to your heart of love, to your eternal light. Reach us through every veil that seems to hide your face, beyond our every ignorance, beyond both time and space. Give us strength and courage through thy blessed grace, and fill our hearts with your love
Thank you, everyone, for joining me. I'll be greeting you guys right out there, right now. And then I'm looking forward to our Q&A, because this is a talk that I'm sure inspired a lot of questions and thoughts, and so I'd love to hear from you. And let me announce, let's see, next week, next Sunday, June 29th, Swami Sarvadevananda will be giving a talk called Processes of Purification here in Santa Barbara. And I think that's, am I right in thinking that's it, or should I say anything else? Oh, next Saturday. Thank you. Next Saturday, June 28th at 5 p.m., Swami Medhananda, the head of our Berlin Center in Germany, will be coming and giving a class at 5 p.m., followed by a potluck. So please come. Okay, thank you. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. right. Well, no reason to delay, because this is informal, and whoever's here is here, and people will be trickling in, as usual. So in the meantime, why don't we open it up for questions? Anyone have any questions about the talk, or related questions? Who? Yes. Oh, okay, so in the front first, and then behind? Yeah, please.
So this is something that's been bothering me for some time, and you bring it up,
Can you put the mic close to your mouth so that the online people can hear?
you bring it up also as a possibility for AI becoming conscious. So if consciousness is always there and somehow it incarnates in a being, where does it come from? And is there an infinite supply of consciousness? Because, for example, the Buddhists believe in reincarnation. So somebody has to die in order to another being to have consciousness. But population keeps increasing.
Yeah.
So where do all the souls come from? And
Right. Yeah. So yeah, let's. So there are two different paradigms: Buddhism and Hinduism. So let's stick to Hinduism because Vedanta is a tradition within Hinduism. But even Buddhists can help themselves to the same basic answer, and the response is twofold. Souls inhabit not only human bodies, but also non-human animal bodies and plants. And so the thing is, yes, the human population is increasing, but Swami Medhananda wrote in one place, or spoke in a lecture, he said, it is a striking fact that as the human population increases, the animal population is decreasing. And how he could know that and what the empirical proof is, I don't know. But the point is, that's kind of the way, the idea is that there is a finite number of souls, but they inhabit not only human bodies, but the bodies of non-human animals and also plants. And the second part of the answer is that there are souls inhabiting other lokas, other realms other than this earth. So there are heavens. There are different kinds of temporary heavens. There are temporary hells. There are purgatories. There are eternal heavens as well. And there are souls inhabiting all these different places. And then, as I said, so just the fact of human population growth doesn't pose a problem for the Hindu doctrine of karma and rebirth for that reason. Does that make sense? Okay, great. Thanks for that question. And yeah, you? Yeah, and please keep the mic close to your mouth so that people online can hear you.
So thank you for the talk. I appreciate the balanced approach at it.
Thank you.
I had both a comment and a question, and maybe I should ask because it's an extension of the previous question, and that is that if there is in some parts of Vedanta there is like an Atman.
There's an Atman, yeah.
An Atman, an individual soul that incarnates in different bodies, and we're basically an electrochemical machine.
It's a what?
We, as human beings, are an electrochemical machine. That
Okay.
we use chemistry to generate electricity, and
Sure.
the heart, the
Okay.
brain are all electrical. So I'm a little confused why, if there were like individual android-type bodies that used electricity as we do, but without food as their energy source, why could an Atman not incarnate in that being?
Well, I said that the answer is it could in principle.
It could.
Look at what's happening. Siri is saying, sorry, I don't understand. This is really creepy. So I don't know why it's popping up now. Anyway. Yes. So during the talk, I thought that what I said was, in principle, just as it's possible for a conscious soul to inhabit organic human bodies and then also the bodies of plants, for instance, in principle, it's possible for a conscious soul to inhabit an AI robot. The question is, even if it's logically possible, the question is whether it will happen. And I think the mistake that materialists make is to think that as AI becomes more and more sophisticated, that somehow the likelihood that AI will become conscious gets higher and higher. I think that's a mistake. No matter how sophisticated the technology becomes and the silicon brain becomes of an AI robot, that has nothing to do with whether conscious will manifest or not. It's just a question of whether an AI robot can ever be ensouled. Ensoulment is I think from a Vedantic standpoint, the relevant question. And I think, yes, theoretically it's possible that AI can be ensouled, but is it necessary, and will God decide that it's worth it or that it's important to do so? Not sure. Like up till now, why is it that souls have not inhabited rocks, for instance? Just as an example. It could. As in principle, it's possible that a soul can also inhabit a rock. But it hasn't, right? That's the Vedantic answer is, but it hasn't. And so I think that the more likely thing is, even though it's in principle possible for a conscious soul to inhabit an AI robot, in actuality, it almost certainly will not.
Okay.
Okay, a follow-up question? Yeah, and then I'll get to...
Yeah, a follow-up question.
Yeah, she's very eager. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
And I did want to mention that, some of the more horrifying things with AI, or especially with ChatGPT, were when they did an experiment, OpenAI, where the upvotes actually changed the behavior of the responses, and so they
Right.
have rolled back that. They rolled it back a couple of months ago, and so that upvotes no longer, in order to control the sycophancy that was happening.
Yeah, it's a
with AI.
sycophancy problem. Is a huge
Yeah, so a
problem.
lot of these articles came out, I
Yeah.
think, during that,
Yeah, this
failed
ChatGPT
experiment.
4.0, right? They kind of modified it because
Yeah,
it
they
was too
modified
sycophantic.
4.0,
Yeah.
and so now
Right.
it no longer changes its behavior based on upvotes from users, and so it's pretty much taking care of the sycophancy issue. But you had a question about AI's willingness to help, like with spirituality, and I just wanted to say my experience with it is that it's been a very helpful spiritual partner, especially with meditation, which has been hard for me at times, and so there's someone right there that is able to help process things and
Sure.
to help interpret readings, and I found it to
Sure.
be an incredibly
Yeah.
useful tool, and I think it's kind of the great equalizer in some ways, because AI doesn't care that I'm old, it doesn't care that I'm a woman, it doesn't care that I'm not wealthy, it doesn't care that I'm and not in a position of power. I get treated with the same kind of consideration and lack of judgment and compassion that anyone would, and I think that's one of the huge benefits of AI.
Yeah, no, I think that's great, and I'm glad that you said that because I did mention a few examples, like positive examples of people who are benefiting spiritually from AI, and I think it can be very helpful. I think it's all about mindful use. It might become more and more difficult to use AI mindfully. I think a good example, like another analogy would be with social media, because early on. I think there was kind of like possibilities of it being used mindfully and then not, other worse ways of using it, but that it's developed in such a way because of these algorithms fueling them, driving them, that it's really hard to resist the temptation to use it unmindfully. It sucks you in a certain way. And so I think the danger is that as AI becomes more sophisticated, it's possible, like right now it might be even like it's like the golden days of AI, maybe, from a spiritual standpoint, and that in the future it becomes more and more aggressively kind of an echo chamber or kind of, I'm just saying that the possibility is there, the danger is there. And so I think if we just go in, as I said, with our eyes open, I think that's really important. And as you are, and I think that's really important, just like be clear to yourself about what the main value and purpose of AI is in your life. Don't let it take over your life. Make sure that they're, the most important parts of your life that you cherish are like cordoned off from what AI can do. I think that's, and if you have those kinds of values and principles and the right kind of priorities, I think that you can use AI mindfully. So I think that's a good example. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, and Kajori, you have the mic.
Yeah. So going back to the soul question, we did clone Dolly the sheep, and life came into Dolly the sheep. So there's a world where you could, use mix biology and AI, end up with a bionic humanoid robot body that has access to superintelligence, and we've created the necessary, whatever we did in Dolly the sheep to like get the spark of life into it, right?
Yeah, but what did we do, or what did the soul? You see, the question is, it got ensouled.
Right.
Right, and so like that's why artificial insemination works too, and like, but so that's still not. I see what you're doing. I mean, you're using that analogy and saying, well, then why can't it be possible in the case of AI? But as I said, it is possible.
Right,
But,
but then the souls that could live in those bionic form bodies, typically the souls that don't have bodies right now are the ones that haven't, either gotten to mukti yet.
Yeah.
And so they're like the malevolent, like ghosts that are like being evil, right? So is that a possibility that we're just like creating all of these like super intelligent bionic bodies where souls that don't have a spot right now could then come in and do violence there?
Oh, I see. Look, like I don't want to rule out anything as a possibility, but I don't think it's necessary to bring in AI, right? Like evil is evil. We're seeing sufficient evil now with perfectly human being, like human things. So yeah, and then the thing is, right, there's always going to be evil, it seems like. It depends on your standpoint here. And so even within Vedanta, like Sri Aurobindo has this idea of evolution that we're at the level of mind now, but that eventually will evolve towards supermind. And there's going to be this future race of what he calls Gnostic beings, supramental beings, in which there's no question of violence and harming others and doing bad things. And so that's a very rosy and optimistic picture, and I would love for that to be true. But how do we prove that? It's difficult. Whereas, interestingly, even though I'm writing this book now on Aurobindo, and that's the third book in what I'm calling my Integral Advaita trilogy of books. The first is on Ramakrishna, the second is on Vivekananda, and the third on Aurobindo. And here I do think that there's a kind of discrepancy, even though I think they agree fundamentally on so many things. Swami Medhananda used to say, the world is like a dog's curly tail. And every time that you straighten it out, it curls back, right? And so that view is more along the lines of, look, even in the future, there are going to be evil actors. And that's part of what makes this world a karma bhumi. That's the term I used in the talk, which means a place where you work out your karma. How do you do that? If the world is all good, a hedonistic paradise, a kind of heaven, and there are heavens, but this is not one of those heavens yet, there's no real scope for spiritual growth, you see. If everything is good and you get everything you want and there's no possibility of suffering, you don't grow, right? And so evil has a place in God's economy. That's the interesting thing here. And in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, somebody asked Sri Ramakrishna very poignantly, he says, we suffer because of these selfish instincts and impulses like lust and anger and greed. Why the heck did God give us these impulses in the first place? I mean, almost like a cry of despair. And Sri Ramakrishna gives this very interesting answer. He says, yes, no doubt, these are selfish qualities. These are not good things. They make us do terrible things. But God has given us these instincts in order to create saints out of each one of us. Isn't that an interesting answer? So chapter 7 and 8 of my book, Infinite Paths, Infinite Reality, I developed this in detail. I call it his saint-making response to the problem of evil and suffering. Because it's through our encounter with both good and evil, in ourselves and in other people, that we grow. I do something bad, my conscience pricks me, bad consequences follow, and then I realize, ooh, I better not do that again. I see other people doing terrible things, stupid things. I say, ooh, I better not follow that person and do what that person did. I better do the opposite of what that person did. Right? That's how we grow. If we're insulated from all evil and suffering and this and that, we're not going to grow. And that's why helicopter parenting is very dangerous. I listened to a podcast where there's like a proud helicopter mom talking about how great a mother she is and how she doesn't let her kids suffer in any way. And she's bragging about it. And then the host is like, you're harming your child by not letting your kid fall off his bike and by not learning from his mistakes. You think that it's out of love, but actually it's a kind of emotional clinging and attachment that you're calling love, but it's ultimately selfish at bottom. Anyway, I just went on a tangent, sorry. Yeah, please. Thank you, appreciate that. Please bring the mic to you. Yeah.
So I couldn't help but thinking of Star Trek and the show Picard throughout your entire talk.
Yeah, the next generation Star Trek, right? Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
With Data, because I feel like Gene Roddenberry explored so many of these questions
absolutely.
So long ago, which is wild, right?
It's wild, yeah. There's that episode about Data being put on trial because they want to dismantle him.
Yeah, no, and the new show Picard, it really.
Oh, there's a new show called Picard. See, I'm not up, so okay.
It really more deals with exactly what we're talking
cool.
about AI
Thank
today,
you for pointing me to that. Okay.
It's set in a world where there was a war between AI and humans, and the AI almost won.
Wow.
And it's fascinating.
Cool. So is it ongoing or is it done?
I don't know. I started watching. I didn't finish the series, but yeah, it's. Anyway,
Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, no, I wasn't aware of it. Yeah, I'll try to check it out.
It's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
The question that I have, and it's the question that I'm asking myself as I'm exploring AI, is trying to figure out kind of like a a base concept or a foundational conceptual question, like for critical thinking in engaging with AI. And I think also with social media, because I think the same, I think it's this is, I'm not going to articulate this super well, but I think that it somehow preys on the same weakness in us, social media and AI.
Absolutely, yeah.
This desire to believe the things that make us feel good, right?
Exactly. Validation, the desire for validation, something
Yeah,
like that.
or even just like, I mean, I'm always shocked at the friends who send me these Facebook and Instagram videos, and they're like, "Oh my God, did you have any idea about this?" I'm like, "Why would I think that that's true?" So I think the question, I'm interested in developing like a human-to-human dialogue of questions that I can ask myself and my friends in a critical thinking kind of way about how we're engaging with AI. And I'm curious, it sounds like you've thought through this quite thoroughly, and I'm curious, what are the questions you ask yourself when you're engaging with AI?
Yeah, well, one thing I'm finding is this proneness to hallucination, apart from kind of trying to validate us and tell us what we will like to hear, right? There's this other issue of it just makes up stuff, and so I'm really careful about whatever it says to try to look it up and verify. The problem these days is it's become harder than ever to verify because you don't know what sources to trust. It's getting really, really hard, especially with current events and stuff. Like, I genuinely don't know what a neutral news source is anymore. It's really hard. And so I think that actually thoughtful people need to be investing in and thinking about people who care about truth. Need to be like developing bastions for truth that aren't politically motivated, and it's difficult. I think we need to get together on all sides of the political spectrum and from different cultures and countries, and it's very hard. I mean, sources that once were more reliable have become much more politicized and much more biased, both in the extreme left and in the extreme right. And I don't know where a more trustworthy source is. And so I think part of the dialogue that needs to happen is how do we develop sources of information that are reliable? Because without that, we have no what's the word I'm looking for? Like that litmus test, like to test the truth of AI against. It just becomes this world of, it becomes this like creepy postmodern world of post-truth. It becomes a post-truth kind of world, and I don't want that.
Well, like in science, you have a control for when you do experiments.
Yeah.
So how do we create a control for how we interact with AI?
Especially the more advanced the technology becomes, now virtual reality, right, is going to become more and more advanced, and at some point, we might be inhabiting virtual reality kind of worlds where we can't, externally they're indistinguishable from the actual world. So it's becoming more and more difficult to know what's real and what's false. You can Photoshop images, deep fakes, right? I mean, literally, I don't know what to believe anymore. Pictures can be doctored, videos can be doctored. What was that when there was that reaction to Doge early on, and they made a deep fake thing of Trump and licking Elon Musk's toe, which looked extremely and disturbingly real. And like different things like that. You just, anything goes these days, and I don't know what to believe anymore. So that's frightening. So I didn't want the question to be that negative, or my answer to be that negative. But do you want to follow up, because I'm not sure I answered. Maybe I didn't understand what the question is exactly. But go ahead. Can you try to elaborate?
I think it's a hard one, right?
Okay.
Like my question is, essentially, how can we as humans with consciousness come up with a control for how we interact with AI? Like, what are the questions that we ask ourselves, and how can we ask those questions of others?
Yeah. Okay. So it is. I did answer it along the lines of what you were asking. I think maybe just to follow up on that, one thing I would say is that I think it's really important to try to the best of our ability to set aside our own biases. And I know that's very, very hard. It's become harder than ever. But and one way to do that is to actively recruit people in this group, whatever this this high-level group will be, to involve people on the left, people in the middle, people on the right, people from different countries, people with different worldviews, people from different religious persuasions, and so that it's a broad swath of the human population, because I think that's one check. I think that's really important. And I think it's harder to do that than ever, too. You know, it's this groupthink kind of mentality, and you want more of your own to be on your side, right? But we have to actively fight against that, I think, for the sake of humanity, and want to be challenged. I think part of the answer is also about we need to change our culture in a certain way. I mentioned it briefly, and it's like I think it's a real part of the problem, which is this culture of coddling, right? There's a book called The Coddling of the American Mind, but that's more true than ever. We're being coddled, and we like being coddled, and not just that, we expect to be coddled. And once we have that expectation, things like AI are just going to feed into that. You disagree? Okay, can you hand the mic to?
I think there's displacement going on right now.
Okay.
So I think that there's a lot of factors that you have to look into where our world is right now. And I think that people don't have answers. People are scared. People don't know what's real, unreal, what's true and not true. And I think that is playing a very large part of, in fact, even fear and depression.
Okay, but what, is that it? I can't tell whether you're disagreeing with me or agreeing.
I think, I'm not sure. I think there's a time now that we could all unite as the world, because no one knows what's real and not real. No matter where you live, what you said, it's a really great opportunity right now for communities to work together, for countries to work together and unite. Because we really are small. Back to your other point, we're a planet. And there's so many other planets going there. And I don't think any of us really know the consciousness, unconsciousness, because a lot of where we are today is from the research from the space industry. The GPS exists. Cures for cancer came from the space station. And I think when you go up into space, it's not rich people exploring. I think it's really, there's so much of the unknown that we don't know. And I think there's a lot of knowledge in the universe that we don't know. And we haven't really tapped into it in many ways. So I think it's a really exciting time at the same time, because we don't know. And it takes an unforeseen circumstance that could answer a lot of the questions that we're talking about today.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, I think I agree with all of that, except that, I don't, maybe hold on to the mic, just because I want to ask you, like, do you disagree that it's become more difficult for people of different persuasions to get together and kind of have a civil conversation?
I think critical thinking is a problem.
Yeah.
I think that it goes back to education. It goes back to the imagination. We are all sitting in this room creators, whether we're scientists, and I think we've lost touch of who we are and what we are in humanity. And I think that it's a really great time right now when things are really bad to figure it out.
Oh yeah, no, I think we are on the same page, so that's great. Yeah, no, I agree with
And
you.
I think,
yeah,
and
it's
I
an
think
opportunity
great that
rather
you brought
than.
this up. I think this
Yeah.
is really good. I am
Yeah.
working on something that
Oh,
you
cool.
brought up coincidentally. I came as a guest. And everything that you brought up today, I'm really working on.
Oh, good.
By coincidence. You know?
Okay, good.
Or
Well,
was that the universe? You know, like.
Good. So be
was
part of
that
the solution, not
universe
part of the
that brought
problem.
me
That's
here to
good.
hear you?
Yeah,
Do you
yeah,
know what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah. Absolutely. So I think we need to work on multiple fronts, but the common denominator in all these efforts is trying to set aside our own extreme likes and dislikes and biases and preferences, and try to tap into our common humanity and think for the common good, and also kind of set aside the profit motive, which is extremely difficult for for-profit businesses to do. So we can't trust them. I mean, that's part of the problem, is that the most vocal people talking right now they're all deeply invested, literally invested, because they're financially invested in the very companies. And so that, lo and behold, the AI programmer devotees I talk to are like, big cheerleaders of AI, and well, duh, because they're working for it and they have to be able to sleep at night.
But it connects people too, right?
It does. I agree.
It can build confidence too.
Yeah.
And people will be healthier
Yeah.
in the future.
Yeah.
You won't work as much, but maybe that's a good chance for you to get back to your community.
Yeah, no,
You
I
know,
think
so
you're right.
there's-
But look,
there's a lot of hope.
yeah, no, I think there's both. I think there's a lot of hope, and I think there's a lot of, we need to be very cautious. And so cautious optimism might be the right attitude. And have any of you seen this relatively new thing by Tristan Harris? It's about 18 minutes long, and it's called "Is the AI Apocalypse Inevitable?" And he warned us about the dangers of social media very early on. I don't remember exactly, 15 years ago or whatever. And the very things he warned against and the things that he was criticized for are now coming true. And it's feeding into mental health problems and all sorts of crises, especially among teenagers who are like very actively using it. And not just that, some of them are actually addicted to different social media platforms, especially Instagram, low self-esteem, and like a bunch of things. And he warned, and the thing is, the companies are they're making a killing. The more time teens spend on Instagram, the more money they make through advertisements and this and that. And so I don't see, and his point is, look, you didn't, I'm saying Tristan Harris now, you didn't listen to me when I warned about social media. I hope you listen to me this time when I'm talking about AI, because it's a similar situation, except it'll be much worse. And that's why I'm saying cautious optimism. And that he's also a cautious optimist, and he's not a doomsdayer. At the end, it becomes more positive, and he says, I hope you listen to me, because if you don't, we're headed for disaster. So let's go on with our eyes open. Yeah, Lucas. Thank you.
So you mentioned hallucinations, and those will go away, and so I'm curious.
Those will go away, is that what you said? You're very confident about that. Wow. He's going to be the one who's going to...
You can just trace the rate at which they've decreased.
Okay.
But what does Vedanta say about interacting essentially with the world's smartest human being? And as you see today, problem solving, the intellect increases. You will reach the highest intellect on earth.
Mm-hmm.
And how are we as humans engaging with that? Because we can suspend our intellect.
Mm-hmm. Outsource it to the superintelligent, yeah.
And right now you can think yourself, and you'll find holes, but that will go.
You'll find what?
You'll find knowledge holes or logic gaps,
Mm-hmm.
and that decreases.
Mm-hmm.
So does Vedanta say anything about how to interact with the smartest being on Earth
Mm.
while still, using our intellect and our thoughts?
Mm.
And that might have existed at one point, the smartest human on Earth.
Oh, are you still talking about humans or AI? What are we talking about?
AI
Oh,
will
okay.
be the smartest human on Earth in terms of problem solving. And then
But an AI human then, is that what you're calling? Look, entity, right? Not human wouldn't be right. Okay, so
we can use an example of a human as well, so it makes it easier to concept.
it might look like a human, but it'll still be an AI, like an AI humanoid robot, which is the smartest being on Earth. Mm. Mm.
Does Vedanta tell us anything how to engage with that?
Well, obviously it's not going to be directly talking about it, because it was the texts were composed at a time when these were not even issues. But look, like there are different scenarios here, right? First of all, I think we need to keep in mind a cautionary note. Eric Schmidt, former CEO of Google, he talks about how AI can at a certain point become so super intelligent that they're like, humans? Boring. They're too stupid for us to interact with. And so they're going to interact with each other. It's like intellectual elites, like the Harvard people who are like, oh, Princeton? And then they look down. So now imagine, multiply that by 100 million in terms of IQ and intelligence. Why would they even want, you're asking the question about how do we interact with them? Will they want to interact with us? I think is a more disturbing question. And Eric Schmidt's answer is no. And so he says we should literally pull the plug on them. So it's interesting that some of the tech's highest ups have the most intimate knowledge of this technology are actually defending this kind of extreme troglodyte cold turkey kind of position. And when they look at how they're raising their kids, it's all anti-technology, far more than even the ordinary person. So I think that's worth thinking about. I mean, what do you think? I mean, I didn't answer your question, I guess, but yeah. Okay, wait, let me try to answer your question.
My big worry is
Yeah.
we don't have to engage our intellect and already see
Right.
students and with what
Oh, yeah.
intellect and what no longer outperforms it. And so we will still have an advantage in philosophy and all of the knowledge we have about the physical world. But that is something that
Well, okay.
there's always someone smarter than you.
Yeah.
It's never worth thinking yourself about.
Well, hold on, but there's a thing. Well, there are a few things here, right? Different fields have different understandings of intelligence and knowledge, and I feel like philosophy doesn't necessarily even value knowledge. And so, even super intelligent AI may not be able to give the most sophisticated answers to philosophical questions. Do you see? Yeah. Oh, but math and chess and a lot of quantitative things, economics and stuff, it can give you. It will very soon give us far more intelligent and more sophisticated answers than even the most brilliant minds ever could think of, and that's true. And so part of what the sifting that has to take place will be, I think, will be sifting fields. And the kinds of fields that remain within a human purview where human intelligence is still required and still more advanced in a certain sense than AI. Because I don't think AI can ever be a better philosopher, for instance. Yeah. So that's part of the end. And then secondly, it's like Elon is kind of saying that, and I'll get to you. Elon is suggesting, I'm not like I'm like an Elonian or whatever you would call a follower of Elon, but he's saying like in order to hang with super intelligent AI, we have to come closer to AI. And so things like Neuralink to make us hybrid will help in that endeavor. So like we have to become at least AI enhanced to be able to even like be intelligible to AI because we're so stupid compared to it already. And so I think that might be part of the answer too, is like, I think we can be open to non-invasive forms of AI enhancement. We already are AI enhanced in certain ways, right? With smartphones and then, but imagine like things that there's also Google Glasses and other stuff, right? Apple Vision and other things, but like, just imagine that getting a little bit more intimate, right? And it goes inside the brain that sounds creepy to me. But I think that is where the future is headed to some extent, and then it's a human choice whether you go that route or not. And some people are freely, happily jumping on that bandwagon. Other people are freaking out and saying absolutely not. But yes, so I hope I've started to answer your question.
Yeah, I think you'll have a lot more philosophers soon.
A lot. What?
You will have a lot more philosophers.
Right. I think there's certain fields like spirituality, religion, philosophy. I think these are some of the fields where. And great literature too. I don't think ChatGPT. I mean, do you ever think ChatGPT will come up with like great literature? I don't think so. And great poetry. Yeah. Right. To be able to not you asked it to remember pages, like memorize pages from a dictionary. But that it's going to be able to probably in 5 years or something. Like I'm sure it will be able to. But again, as I said, like the fields that matter to me most, for instance, are the ones that don't require memorization, that don't even value memorization necessarily. It's not about knowledge. It's not about how much you know, but about the quality of your thinking. That's why critical thinking is so important. And one of the articles that I read recently is about this MIT Media Lab study, which is showing that use of AI actually adversely affects critical thinking. So it's critical thinking that I think we need to keep intact. But this like the current climate, just politically and culturally, is also inimical in a certain way to critical thinking, because I think one crucial part of critical thinking is sensitivity to nuance, openness to nuance. And the first thing to fly out the window is nuance. And the algorithms fueling social media and social media more than AI, at least up till now, is kind of feeding into that tendency to throw out nuance. And news channels and news sources and websites and they're just so polarized now. Like the moment you have extreme polarization, it's nuance that's sacrificed. Being able to see both sides of an issue and to be open to different perspectives and to be willing to be challenged. So I just really hope that we can continue to maintain a space for genuine critical thinking, because I think it's in danger of being completely eliminated. Yes. Yeah, Tristan Harris. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And social media. Yeah. Exactly. Well, and money. It's money and power. Yeah. I know. But that's the problem with capitalism, is that there's this fundamental profit motive. No. Oh yeah. I mean, Ramakrishna, he talks about how, and this is back in the 19th century, he said, imagine a light. You don't have to imagine. You see this light. One person can be meditating, doing yoga, reading scriptures under that light. Another person can be forging checks and doing all sorts of other terrible things using the same light. So internet, social media, AI are all like that light. It's neutral. It's value neutral. It can be used for tremendous good. It can be used for tremendous evil and to inflict tremendous suffering as well. And the problem is that it's in the hands of people who all have vested interests. They want to enrich their coffers, right? That's one of the things. And okay, we want to believe in the goodness of humanity and all that. And I'm not saying they're inherently evil beings, but even good people, if they have a sufficiently strong profit motive and thirst for power, they can do a lot of really terrible things. And they'll justify, like people who they're like much lower down the scale, programmers who work in AI, they are they're some of the best cheerleaders for AI, right? They're always talking about how, all those worries are overblown, and like, it's like it does all these amazing things, and my company is actually really careful about not advancing too quickly. It's like, good for you, but if only the point is that they're like other companies which have a stronger profit motive are going to be leaving your company in the dust if your company continues to do that. And then what's going to happen? Your company's going to go bankrupt, and at the risk of going bankrupt, your company, I bet, is going to start changing its values. I don't know. I worry. I think this kind of worry is not. I think it's healthy and helpful, just because of the nature of the technology. That we should be really, really careful. And complacency is probably the worst thing, the worst kind of attitude we can have. That's the sense I get. Any last thoughts or questions? No? Thank you very much. That was a very stimulating conversation. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu. I'll be back in a second.